In and tell you a little bit more about how we work with clients and offer for you to walk away with the mindset that we really like to ensure our clients have as they're moving into marketing strategy. So they're not leaving anything on the table. And so today we're going to look at marketing not necessarily just as a lead engine or a revenue driver. So don't get it twisted. Of course, we want revenue. Of course, we want profit, and leads are certainly a part of that. But when done the right way, marketing can be more than that and be a strategic lever that actually helps growth and protecting business value. So we're going to talk more about having a value focus versus a revenue focus, having a value focus versus a tactical focus, and being more strategic and process driven. And so everyone is going to exit their business one day. So building value from day one is vital. And whether or not someone is looking to exit or have a big transition in mind on the horizon, having a strong business in place is going to be crucial to ensuring that you're running efficiently, you're hitting those big vision, the big goals, whatever it is that your executive leadership team has in mind, whether it's the eventual exit or transition, or in the short run, some of those big growth goals or shifts that you're looking to make. So a few housekeeping items before we jump in. We're going to keep this session less than 45 minutes. We're going to go through the first half, a few insights. So about three insights we're going to take you on a journey with, have a couple of stories. So hopefully we don't bore you along the way. And then we'll have an optional 15-minute Q&A session at the end. So feel free as we're going through to drop questions in the chat at any point. And if there's something that we don't have time to cover in this session, we're happy to set a follow-up time with you. So for those of you that I have not had the opportunity to meet before, my name is Randy Skinner, and I am co-founder and one of the strategists with VBM Strategy. And of course, my partner, the other co-founder, the co-host here, Heather Steele. And Heather is, again, co-founder and additional strategist and chief brand strategist here at VBM Strategy. So we're excited to jump in, tell you a little bit more about some of the strategic shifts that we've really seen clients make, some of the decision-making stories. And ultimately, we're going to share with you more about what our call to action would be, a next step if you feel like you're ready to jump into marketing, which is the marketing blueprint. So with that in mind, let's move into the idea of a value lever mindset. So the idea of what does it mean to market for value versus leads? So marketing for long-term business value is about building a brand and systems. Those are two keywords to take from this. But more than just building these random brand, random systems, it's about making sure that it aligns with your vision as a business owner, as the CEO, your vision as the board, as the executive leadership team. So it goes beyond just grabbing attention. And it's about the idea of how do you ensure that you're creating real value, protecting what matters, and attracting the right type of opportunities. So one example that we see a lot is the mismatch of branding, messaging, and who they're targeting. So essentially targeting the wrong buyer. So a story that I'm going to give you on this, let's call them Summit Partners. And so they're a B2B service company. That's typically who we are going to work with. And they, from on paper, looks like, they're having some marketing wins. They have a steady stream of inbound leads, but they're the wrong kind of leads. They're people that are coming in that are more of the price shoppers, not really value focused. There's a really low retention rate that's happening with their clients. And what they learned is that the buyers that were coming in were misaligned. They weren't really valuing the high touch service that the Summit Partners Group was all about. So when you go in and talk to them about their values, it was all about people. It's all about protecting those relationships, protecting the type of quality of service they're going to provide their client base, and how they work with their vendors. And so essentially what was happening is their brand messaging was completely off from this, because it was all about speed and affordability. And internally, if they prided themselves on thoughtful, strategic execution and really protecting those people, their values, those values of protecting people and relationships, it didn't match what their branding was signaling to the market. And so they were working harder, earning less, burning out their team, because if we're not seeing progress, right? Nobody likes to be a part of a team that's not winning if we're not seeing progress. And essentially, it was just misaligned projects. Their marketing wasn't strategic. And so by taking a step back and saying, okay, we really want to protect people. That's the number one thing that we care about. And for us, the way that shows up is the type of relationship driven service that matters to us, the proactive problem solving, strategic insight. And so it was as simple as stepping back, updating their core messaging so that it had more of an alignment with what they felt internally, and shifting what their messaging was externally to their buyers. And so not all revenue is created equal. If your marketing is attracting the wrong buyers, the buyers, for example, for Summit that don't value that quality, the buyers that are looking more for the cheapest option, then you're setting your team up for friction, for missed potential, and you're leaving that value on the table because you're just focusing on quick revenue and tactics versus that big picture of building value. So this idea of shifting from a lead focus to a value focus allowed for systems to be in place, protected what matter. And essentially, this is one example of overcoming what we see a lot, which is that buyer trap. So take this kind of concept as we move into our next segment of value versus lead, and how we can move into a value lever mindset.
So I know that y'all here are very familiar with the idea of building value, and so I appreciate you going on this journey with us to talk about how marketing can really have an impact. And one of the things that we really see a lot with our clients and the people that we work with is that they are so focused in that, well, marketing is just for generating leads. So that we can feed the sales funnel idea, that they sort of overlook all of these other opportunities that they have with marketing and branding to really help shift and make changes in the business as needed. So when we have a client who has a great external advisor, someone who's helping them really work on their business and build value, a lot of times what we see is that advisor is telling the client, you've got to make a big change. In this example I'm going to share today, this was a client who was selling into a market that was really struggling. They were kind of heavily focused on an industry that was starting to struggle, that was seeing a lot of decline in revenue. And this made up 80% of their annual revenue. So there's a big problem. And if you're going to continue on just surviving, but also building value and ultimately finding a buyer, we've got to make some changes. We can't keep relying so heavily on this one market that's really starting to fail. And so we were able to come in and really show them how you can use marketing as a change agent to fix those things that an outside advisor is telling you need to be done. And so in this example, we were able to come in and really look at rebranding in a way that highlights their core competencies and then shows how that relates to other industries. And so we were able to help this client go from heavily relying on one industry to really spreading their revenue out. This also was an issue of heavy client concentration. So this client had just a couple of clients in one industry that they were really relying on for most of their revenue. And so we took that experience, we took everything that they could do with those couple of clients, turned it into some updated messaging, updated their website, really went deep with understanding the case studies we could pull out of there and getting those success stories, and then showing how that applies across other markets and other industries, so that then when we launched a new campaign to put them in front of this new potential audience, they were really coming across as very seasoned and experienced, and a lot of trust was already built in the way that we put their messaging together. And a lot of times what we see is that businesses will struggle to make this shift because they forget that marketing can be that external force to go out and say, this is what we can do, and this is why we are uniquely qualified to do that, even if they actually don't have as much experience in a new market or with a new client type that maybe they feel like they should have before they can make that big step out. And so being able to use marketing to really diversify their client base, diversify the markets and industries that they're in, obviously makes them more stable, more able to survive these downturns in specific industries, and also, really makes them more desirable from the standpoint of a buyer, because now we've taken a lot of the risk out of the business by diversifying and not just relying on this tiny little bucket for revenue. Now we've got a lot of buckets spread out across the business. And so it's really important to think about marketing as not just that thing that feeds sales, right? That's an important part. And that's something that we do want to make sure that we're doing, and that those leads are coming in and you have those right people to work with. But it's also an opportunity to tell your story at a broad level to the right people so that you can make really dramatic changes in your business very efficiently.
So, marketing as a change agent is something that Heather gave the example on. And so, I want to go through just a story of what I'm going to pull out a tactic that we've come across lots of times where we have our clients really feeling a gap and an obstacle in what they should do with their marketing dollars. And so, that strategic decision making mindset is really where we work with them to get to, versus that reactionary mindset. Because if we have this reactionary tactic based mindset, then we're going to miss out on the opportunity to utilize marketing as a value driver, as a change agent. And so the idea here is that long-term marketing infrastructure is really where we can see the best results and be the most valuable when it comes to being built on systems and not just spikes. So being built on those systems and not just leads. So here's the question that I would pose. What would you do with $10,000, specifically if we're talking about marketing budget? So a client came in, they had X number of dollars that they could invest in marketing. And a lot of times when we first work with a client, they come in with some big idea, like, oh, I want to expand in this area or this type of campaign, which we're like, great, we love big ideas. We love innovation. We love visionary businesses. But we're often like, okay, let's talk first about your brand, who it is that you're trying to target to, what you want to protect. Is it that people? Is it profit? Do we really need to focus on processes? And so that's what happened here. We stepped back and said, okay, you could buy a list. That was the big idea. Let's buy a list of 15,000 people that are in this market that we want to focus on, and start reaching out to them. That sounds great, but that's a lot of work with no return at the end, right? So the alternative that we posed, and I'll just toot our own horn, it's a much better idea. Okay. So if the question is on the table of which of these is a better idea, we're going to walk away today with an answer. Is that instead of focusing on that short term, just buy a cold email list, launch a one-time campaign, let's step back and let's talk about how we can build a system. And so for this example, what we did is we built a LinkedIn relationship strategy. We set up automation for follow-ups. We created content that would be more about nurturing warm leads, leveraging how we could ask for referrals, really build relationships, and use LinkedIn as that first line of building our list, so to speak, but then more importantly, having the automation to back it up. And so by taking those marketing dollars and investing in the foundation of content, of automation that really aligned with that long-term goal and the long-term perspective that they wanted to build, it ensured that at the end of the campaign, we could go beyond just leads and we could go beyond just revenue. Absolutely, if you spent 10,000 on 15,000 contacts, let's just say, yeah, you'd have some good results, but at the end of it, there's no structure in place. There's no follow-up. The only thing to do next is to go buy another list and have to spend a lot of time doing the same thing again, manually, so to speak. I'm really working your team versus having that foundation in place. So they instead invested in a LinkedIn engagement strategy, built those relationships with that ideal client, created a really simple automated system, and developed a nurture sequence that framed them as an expert. And so instead of chasing those cold leads, we were really able to focus more on warm conversations. And we all know anything warm is better than cold. And more importantly than that, we created a system that could be repeated, and no matter who ran it. So as they continue to scale and grow, they're able to pull the person that they want to be a part of this growth in to continue running this system. They're able to show their prospective buyer or their leadership team, their executive team or board, hey, this is what we're building. It's scalable, it's less risk, it's creating standard operating procedures for marketing. And ultimately, this is a great example of marketing based on long-term value versus just revenue and leads. And so, of course, we've got the revenue and we've got the leads, but it's done in a more strategic way. And so that mindset shift of quick win, which would be buying the list, versus value building system, it can be such a challenge because building that system takes more time, and it may feel like you're not moving forward in the way that you would think you want to, but a quick win fades. Now, it doesn't mean we can't have some quick wins along the way. It means that when we're faced with building a strategy for your business, you want to make sure that you're prioritizing the systematic way and prioritizing making sure that all of your marketing strategy is aligned with your vision, with your goals, and more importantly, protects what matters most to you as you're moving forward. And the main way to really do that, especially this example really brings it home, is creating something that is a repeatable system. So systems build scalability, they create less risk, they create those SOPs, which oftentimes people think about SOPs for everything except marketing, and it just allows for long-term value-driven results. So strategic decision-making and action, you can always go back to this story of our friends who chose LinkedIn automation versus just building out a leads list. So I know you've heard us talk about protecting what matters. So I want to move us forward, and we're going to jump into the PIT framework, which is going to share with you a little bit more about what we mean when we're saying that marketing can protect what matters most.
So we use this framework to really help our clients anchor on to a couple of things. First of all, we're looking at as we help you grow, as you're scaling, as you're working towards that vision, what's the thing that you need to protect most to make sure you're going to get there? And so we break this up into people, impact, process, and profit. So people would be, they know to get to their vision, to get to where they're going, they need to protect those people who make their business work. They're at the stage where that team, the people that are on their leadership team, those specific clients they have, that is what's going to make or break them. People who really prioritize impact are organizations that they say, no matter what, we have to protect our impact. We are on a mission. We're trying to influence either something in the world around us. We're trying to change the way that things happen within our industry. Maybe they're really built on the idea of giving back to certain causes. And that is the thing that they're like, if we sacrifice this, then our vision is just for nothing. Process is those clients who really have to prioritize protecting the repeatable, scalable, and transferable processes to get to their vision. And then we have our profit folks who really they're at the point in their business where that financial engine and sustainability is the key thing that they're protecting. Now, picking one of these things as the priority doesn't mean that we're letting everything else go or that it doesn't matter, but it's really a great way for us to come back and re-anchor people to, okay, as you make this decision on how you're going to spend this marketing budget or how we're going to focus your branding or what positioning statements we're going to use, let's go back to what we're protecting most and make sure that this decision aligns with that PIP and also tracks you for your vision. And this is something that we see a lot of times is completely overlooked in marketing. So you may have an outward branding and market approach that completely derails what the owner or the leadership team has actually identified as the most important things to be protecting and focusing on. And so by bringing those things together, we can really have a much stronger message. And ideally, especially when we're able to work with coaches and consultants who are helping them work towards whatever that next big thing is, whether it's an exit or just a big transition within their business, we can help to align that and make sure that everything from the marketing and branding standpoint is going to really consistently protect what matters most to them, but also help them align culturally with that next step. So let's say in one example, we had a client who was working, they had a strategic buyer basically who had approached them that was interested in acquiring them. And they were really looking to us to help them kind of clean some things up and make them look a little bit more attractive to the strategic buyer. So this was something where, it's not just a PE grab. It's really someone who's trying to grow their business through that strategic acquisition. So we knew that it was more than just about the numbers, right? We really needed to show that there is a culture and a values match between these two organizations. Because, we're talking a couple of small businesses, they're going to merge together and hopefully live out their lives together. And so it really was important that we were able to show how this buyer could come in and really assimilate the team and bring those people that are already part of the business in and have them match up really well with their existing business. In this situation, the revenue was really great for our client. They looked really good on paper, but when you went a little deeper than that, it turned out that that revenue was really great because the owner could work his tail off. He would go out there and get deals and close them, and it was very much everything kind of rode on him. And so as we looked at, okay, well, this is going to become pretty obvious that there's not a transferable system. There's no processes and scalability here from a lead gen or a new business acquisition standpoint. And so that could really harm this transaction because they're looking for you to bring in more revenue as part of this, strategic acquisition. So let's build some systems in place. Let's start running these things for a while so that we can show, okay, we have our processes documented. We have ways to get in front of our market and to really scale that lead generation effort without it all relying on the owner. And then finally, another thing that was really important was that we were building the systems that all of that could live in. So they were a business that liked to kind of run on some random spreadsheets. Some things were in notebooks written down, some things were sort of all over the place. And so this was a great opportunity to bring all of that in, get them working out of a common CRM so that, again, we could show this is a really easy thing to kind of pick up and put into your system or combine our system so that as this acquisition goes through, we're bringing strength and not just causing you a headache of trying to get all of our stuff cleaned up. Another example that we've seen is that internal sale, right? We're setting up an ESOP or we're doing some sort of sale to the team And, I think that that's something where we really see culture and values fit is so important, because who's going to want to buy in to being an owner of the business they work for if they really hate working there, if they don't have that team alignment and value, and if they're not all really clear on the mission and what we're working for and why and what we care about. And so, again, that's just so important for us to build that brand in a way that it's very clear, both externally and internally, what everyone cares about. And then final example, I'll go fast here to keep us on track so we have plenty of time for our Q&A. But the family succession, right? Huge stakes on the line when you're talking about selling to your child or someone in your family, because now it's not just the transaction, it's the whole personal relationship that's on the line. If you're building a business that you want to pass on to your children, but you're not building that in a way that's going to really be values oriented and leave them with something that's a combined joint mission to continue running, that can cause huge problems between the seller and the buyer, which oftentimes we see is a parent and a child. And so having those things on the front end where we've already agreed on what's most important, we've already identified that, we've used those things to even tell the market what we really care about and what matters most to us in a way that's appropriate. It just helps to really solidify that transition, and then also maintain more of a consistency to the outside market, because now you're not just changing values immediately when someone else is coming in and taking over the business. It's really a consistent transfer, and we're seeing that the outside market isn't getting disrupted by that and this new change in what's most important. Okay, so we are ready to talk about how we can help kind of bring this home for folks. Randy, you want to talk through these couple of options here?
So everything that we've gone through today, whether it's values, branding, diversification, the importance of systems, it really comes back to one thing: protecting what you've built while increasing the overall value of your business. And so we wanted to share a little bit more about how we do this with our clients. And so the way that we go through these various aspects are through a marketing strategy blueprint. And so if a blueprint is something that you'd want to learn more about, the call to action here would be, let's set up a 15-minute chat. Let's talk more about it specifically to you, your business, your leadership team. But to give a little bit of an idea of what that process is like, we first have our clients do what we call a homework assignment. So we're going to share this link with you. The homework link that you see here, it's a great tool that you can do whether or not you want to move forward with a blueprint or have a chat. It's yours to start gathering your ideas, your assets, getting clarity on what that marketing strategy could be built around. And so as part of the blueprint strategy session, we first have our owners, our leadership team do the homework. They go through it, takes less than an hour. And then when we come together for that 3-hour marketing session, we're able to really dive into figuring out, okay, are we good on vision, values, and goals? Where do we need to dive deeper into? How can we make sure that everything is aligned when it comes to determining what the tactics are? And so we go through a 3-hour strategy session. And at the end of that, our clients walk away with a 12-month plan of where they can focus in a way that's aligned with their vision, their values, and goals. But also there's the next 90 days of action that is prioritized for them as well. So we're able to produce that for our clients in a way that is customized and unique to them. So they can take it, they can implement it internally with their team, or of course, we're there to function as a fractional CMO to help fill some of those gaps wherever they have them. So that is the first line of action for our clients, is to develop that marketing blueprint so that we can make sure they're having that value lever focus, that we're not missing out on how marketing can be a change agent, and then we're being strategic. And so all of the examples, the stories, the scenarios that we've gone through today, that's all an example of how the marketing blueprint can make sure that we're accomplishing that for the businesses or organizations that we work with. So that is your call to action. If you want to talk more about blueprint, let's set up a 15-minute chat. If you want to just get a little organized, whether or not you want to chat, here is our homework link so you can start diving in and having those conversations. So it's a great way to start moving ideas into action. And it's the first step to really focusing on value versus just tactics and reactionary actions versus strategic actions. So I want to move us into Q&A. If you have specific questions that you want to toss out, you're welcome to come off mute, toss them into the chat. We also have a few questions that have been sent our way that we can roll through if there's not something specific. So is there anything specific that we want to cover as far as questions?
All right, Randy. Well, I'll throw you one that we received from one of the folks that registered. So what would you say is the first sign that your current marketing isn't aligned with the idea of long-term value?
Okay, well, I think this goes back to the very first example. Number one, you've got the wrong leads coming in. So if you don't have the right type of client coming in, then absolutely we're leaving opportunities on the table and we're not aligned. I think it also goes with a gut feeling. So if you as the owner or your leadership team, when they come to the table, you're like, man, things feel misaligned. I feel like there's not a connection. I don't feel like I have clarity in my marketing. I don't feel like there's a connection to the vision, to the goals. Huge red flag. So definitely the wrong leads. And then that gut feeling as you're having the conversation amongst your leadership team about how you're feeling about marketing and what you're seeing. Is there a connection and is there clarity? And if there's not, then we're not hitting that value opportunity. So, okay. We're gonna toss back and forth, and feel free to drop any questions in the chat. So Heather, here's a question for you. How do you balance brand building, which we know, if done right, can take a little bit of time, right? So how do you balance brand building with those short-term lead goals, especially, when we have clients that are like, well, I want it all, I want both.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm always impressed when a client does want both, because a lot of times they are so focused on that big idea that they've come to us with, or the idea of needing more leads, which we like to say that leads are not the problem, but that
Right?
takes time to teach folks and to help them get around. So I think the first thing is to be realistic about, if you have a short-term goal, what can you actually accomplish within that short term? Right? If we're focusing strictly on like a lead-based goal, you got to be honest with yourself about what can you really do for your business within that short time that you're trying to accomplish something. And usually when we see this, when someone's like, I need help yesterday, I've got this leads problem, there's really a lot of bigger issues going on, and there's bigger gaps in what's happening within the business. And so when we are in that situation, I think we can do a really good job of helping a client have that correct perspective and have sort of a reality check, but also alleviate some of their issues by sort of focusing on an 80-20 rule, right? So let's spend, for this first month, 80% of the time, the budget, the effort on fixing the short-term problem, and 20% on building a process and something scalable around that solution. And then over time, maybe it's every month, maybe it's every 2 months, we start to shift that, where we're doing a little less of the urgency, kind of putting out fires, trying to make payroll, those issues that we're dealing with in the beginning, and we're really shifting more of the time to the long-term strategy and process building. But if we can at least get them to give us that 20% of the time, effort, and budget to building the long-term solution and processes on the front end, that's going to take us a long way, because most people are putting 0% of their time and effort into really building scalability and processes within their marketing. Okay, Randy, let's see. I've got a list here. I'm going to ask you, if I'm thinking about selling my business in the next 3 to 5 years, what do you think, from a marketing and branding perspective, I should start focusing on right now? Oh, are you frozen? I think you're frozen. Okay, well, I'll just throw out my answer and maybe Randy's computer will start cooperating with us. So, if I've got someone who is kind of just starting, they've got that long leadway. Oh, you're back.
Yeah, it was really weird. I just got kicked out. Hi, I'm
You're
here.
frozen on this end. I don't know what happened, but I was asking you, if someone has that 3 to 5 year kind of outlook to, they know they want to sell, but it's still off in the future, what would you say they should start focusing on today, to really set themselves up in the right direction?
Okay, so I think this is one that in the past we've overlooked this first step, especially ourselves as business owners. But number one, you got to get the right experts around you, because the idea, a lot of times the folks that we work with, they may not even know that an exit is what's coming for them. It may just be they have a lot of growth goals or there's a big transition in place. And so by ensuring that you get the right experts in place, you can ensure that you're not leaving anything on the table. So that is the number one thing. And even better, if they're coming to the table and they already know that they're ready to exit, right? So that would be the number one thing. And then I would say the other item would be focusing on process and automation. And I feel like we can't really ream that home hard enough, because a lot of times folks think that, okay, if I have automation, it's going to replace that relationship builder, that relationship driver that I've built my business on. And the reality is, when done right, when you know your audience really well, it just comes alongside. It doesn't replace anything. It allows you to make sure you're not leaving anything on the table. And one of the things that we've just recently been talking about is people that we work with, when they come in, they think that automation is going to be cold. And quite frankly, it's not, if you're doing it right. If you're not doing it correctly because you're misaligned in your messaging, then it will be. So find the experts and create the systems. Okay, so last question. And I am going to toss this one to you, Heather. Okay, so I'm going to give you a curveball. So we've relied on referrals. How do we build systems without losing our personal touch?
Okay, so obviously, referrals are, especially for B2B service providers, the kind of folks that we work with, referrals are incredibly important. And so I think people tend to think of automation or systems as kind of this cold thing, right? But we were talking just earlier today about how, like, the coldest thing you can do is just not talk to someone, not ever touch them at all. So if your business is heavily reliant on referrals, you should be using some automation and systems to make sure you are nurturing and staying in front of those best referral sources. Whether that's scheduling lunches with them, having ongoing conversations with them, or even using an email drip campaign to keep them up to speed with the problems you solve for clients, some of those success stories, how you can work together with your referral partners. That's all so important. And it's work that you don't have to do on an individual one-to-one basis. You can focus your time on the really high value activities, like sitting down and having time together, and use your automation and systems to kind of nurture through the rest of the minutia of things that it takes to really maintain those relationships with partners. It's also a great way, to highlight the wins that you have and share those with your referral partners, because Otherwise, how are they going to know? How are they going to know the great things that you're doing with your clients that you serve if you're not telling them? And doing that through some systems and automation is a great way. It doesn't have to feel impersonal. You can write those emails and messages to feel very one-on-one, even if you are using them at scale.
Love that. I think that really brings all of the topics and insights that we've touched on today. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. If there's something that we left on the table that is a question around any of the topics that we covered, or if you want to learn more about how to launch your marketing blueprint strategy session, grab a time for a 15-minute chat and we can dive a little bit deeper. And then, of course, there's always the homework form so you can make better use of that 15-minute call or just use it as a tool to begin the conversation with your leadership team.